Presidential candidates Peter Obi and Omoyele Sowore have disagreed with the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar over his proposal to restore petrol's subsidy if elected president in 2027. Obi, the presidential candidate of the Nigerian Democratic Congress, NDC, said subsidy removal remained necessary, arguing that the failure of successive governments to properly manage and invest the proceeds should not be used as a reason to reverse the policy. While Sowore, the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress, AAC, also opposed a return to the former subsidy regime, but argued that its removal had largely benefited state governors and the elite rather than ordinary Nigerians. Joining us on this show to review how presidential frontrunners are framing the rhetoric around fuel subsidy and how it is resonating with the masses ahead of 2027 is Dr. Sam Amadi, a Rice News analyst and a distinguished Malabite. Good morning, Malabite. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Amadi.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chief.
Well, just good your morning. Take.
Good morning, Steny.
Good morning, sir.
Just your take on the subsidy debate, because that's what it has become now. Should it be removed? Should it be sustained? How has it worked? Who has it benefited? Where are the fault lines?
The subsidy issue didn't quite register with last election in that sense. But this election is promising to be a major issue. But again, we have to step back. I think 2 points. The economics of it is debatable. People argue that the subsidy is inefficient, but we know that subsidy takes different form. Some could be good tools that government use to drive economic development. But the subsidy in Nigerian context has been inefficient, maybe counterproductive. So all the candidates in last election says remove subsidy, but they have different nuances. Atiku had a different nuance, Obi had a different nuance, Tinubu had a different nuance. But the key point here is, now it's politically maybe a hardball, because if you look at the suffering, the cost of living, and the general sentiment, it's attractive for those who supported subsidy removal to turn back and now say maybe, and of course, in politics, you have to change your views, you have to respond to constituencies, you have to look at the political map and decide where to pitch your camp. So we have to admit that subsidy has not proven to be good. We have to admit that subsidy can be good. We have to admit that subsidy is a physical tool that government can use to boost production, boost consumption, which has good effect on the economy. I also have to admit that the manner in which subsidy was removed perhaps was not properly thought out, and the complementary policies, devaluation of currency, removal of electricity subsidy may have compared impact. So politically, this is a hot potato. It will help opposition depending, again, on how it resonates. My sense is that it might not be decisive because the Nigerian people will look beyond whether you remove subsidy or not. They also ask, do you have the capability to rein in corruption if you keep the subsidy or if you remove it? So subsidy alone might not be the turnkey to deciding who will better run the economy. But subsidy could prove to be important in messaging, and ultimately, it depends on how it's messaged. If it's messaged as part of capability to control costs, improve economic policy and welfare of the citizen, it helps. If it is messaged as a mere tool of policy, it might not bring much traction.
Okay, thank you very much. Now you talk about, you've highlighted what I believe was Mr. Peter Obi who had said, and a number of people, that subsidy removal in itself is not the problem. It is the way in which it was done. You've said the same thing here this morning. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, 3 years post-removal of fuel subsidy, what is the Tinubu administration missing Because at the end of the day, what we're looking forward to is how the Nigerian people can benefit from a policy that already exists. What is it missing and what must it do to make the most vulnerable people in society, and at least as many Nigerians as possible, feel the benefits of this policy direction?
Very good question. Again, look, like I said, physical tools are monetary tools. Of course, the modern thinking is that monetary tools are limited in consequence. They have a time lag. They could be counter-cyclical. But physical tools are important. So first thing is this. If you're removing subsidy to have more revenue and to stop inefficiency, how do you ensure that, first, the impact of that subsidy removal does not worsen outcome in terms of household income, in terms of consumption of essentials, in terms of cost of mobility? So three things can happen. In many countries, you see cash transfer through transparent model. In fact, the whole U.S. Act in 2021, after the COVID, during the COVID, was to stimulate household consumption, mitigate impact of the COVID by cash transfer. But in Nigeria, cash transfer has had a problem with administration. That's number one tool. The second tool also is that you control other aspects of the economy. For example, you can remove fuel subsidy while keeping some efficient electricity subsidy. You can also improve negative tax credit, meaning negative tax, so that households have more money. Of course, minimum wage increase has very consequential, perverse consequence. But more importantly, how you manage the proceed of subsidy removal is critical. People argue because we are a federation, state government, federal government cannot control state spend. But that's not true. So the Tinubu government could nudge all the states together to use the windfall, the subsidy savings, to invest in sectors that have direct knock-on impact on people. The problem is that you save the money is not well used, you also aggravate other aspects of household failure in terms of income generation, unemployment, jobless, no unemployment benefits. You also increase electricity tariff, you also allow devaluation. So the cumulative effect erodes the positive impact of that saving. So the first thing to do is to step back impact, the cost benefit in a broad sense, not just how much government is getting, but how much households are losing in terms of welfare, in terms of income, in terms of multidimensional poverty increase. If you bring all together, you'll be able to now know what degree of subsidy removal is important. Again, you can bring back some subsidy in the value chain. You can also help with subsidy on the side of production. This also helps to reduce the impact of the subsidy removal. So there are many possible policies, but they must be coherent and coordinated. So far, we're not getting that.
Dr. Amadi, I don't like talking about the hypocrisy of the Nigerian state. It nauseates me. It annoys me. So all of this one we are talking about is rubbish as far as I'm concerned. Because the arguments they've made in defense of subsidy has fallen flat in their face. Dr. Amadi, how do you explain that the people that are claiming that paying 7 trillion every year was a problem in subsidy had the nerve to give import waivers of 34 trillion? And today they can't print out the names of those they gave those import waivers to. So the question with the Nigerian state is, and I want to ask you, how long are they going to keep subsidizing the bourgeoisie class in such a way that the lower class, nothing trickles down? When will they reverse it? And I'm not delusional to think that they will reverse it. All I'm just asking for is at least they should do a little bit more for the lower class, while the bourgeoisie class can keep eating and keep feeding fat, which is not today they've been eating and feeding fat. That's just my bone of contention. I'm about the very poor class, the down below. How can we at least free up spending? They are okay. But let's stop this hypocrisy that fuel subsidy was the biggest calamity on earth. They paid times 5 of that subsidy in import waivers in 1 year. They dashed it to their friends and family. If they have the nerve, they should print out the names of those they gave those waivers to and justify it. That's just my question for you today.
Okay, thank you. Look, the policy of a government reflects the government's own objective. It reflects the social class that the government prioritizes. This government prioritizes the business class, their fellow entrepreneurs, and not the people. Subsidy itself is nothing. All over the world, subsidy is used. It depends on what you want to achieve with subsidy, whose welfare is it targeted to. So you're right. The government targets benefit for the 1% you mentioned. Again, it's historic. Look, the crisis of subsidy started before now. And the notion was that it was corrupt, it was benefiting the middle class, the middlemen, the marketers, and not the people. That's a fact we have to factor in, that the subsidy on petroleum is misadministered. But you're right that the focus of this government policy today is not on lifting the poor. And that's in my own sense, is President Tinubu's lens of economics is balance sheet of government. It's also around what happens to the business class. It shows in Lagos State's own indicators, very good with revenue, very good with the corporate world, but education, healthcare, the basic things that affect the poor is not very good. The same with the policy. So for me, I judge the subsidy policy removal of this government as a failure because ultimately it has not improved the economy in terms of productivity. It has not generated welfare gain for the people. And it's also a function of the economics that the government is focusing. We assume that economic policy making is academic. It is managerial. It's about what evidence are you building on? Okay. Are you building the evidence of the poor, people who are getting poorer and poorer, or the evidence of the people who are getting richer and richer? So for me, subsidy is always a tool. It responds to government policy, the interest you want to protect, and the evidence you are building. For me, I don't think you should remove subsidy the way it did, and I don't think you should bring subsidy the way it is being administered. And that's why I think that the middle road that Mr. Peter Obi took maybe makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Amadi, I seek a clarification. This whole idea of fuel subsidy savings, is it not a myth? At the time, the federal government of Nigeria was saying, oh, we're providing subsidy and all that, they were borrowing money to fund, is it under recovery or cost recovery that they called it. When President Tinubu said subsidy is gone, it meant that, okay, they will not borrow anymore to fund the inefficiency of the NNPC at the time. So is it now correct to say that, oh, the states are getting more money because of savings from fuel subsidy in FAC allocation? The increased FAC allocation, is it not because of the devaluation of the Naira? Because there are some gray areas in the whole of this conversation.
Well, I think too many things are happening. I didn't hear very much. If I heard you well, look, the subsidy removal gave government some fiscal space. But again, devaluation also gave them more money, potentially. But when you look at the real value of that fund, it's less than what it is. So there's also a money illusion with government. We have more money, but by virtue of devaluation, we have less. That's a money illusion. But back to the subsidy issue, I think for me, what matters are two things. One is efficient production. If our production is efficient, then the costs will somehow be more efficient. Second, government follows proper pricing, and then government steps in where it thinks that the market price has adverse consequence. But how government steps in matters for the future sustainability of both production and stable economic micromanagement. So the point is that the states, the devaluation affects the so-called fiscal space. Again, subsidy contributed, but ultimately, the big debate is what we do with the money. We use the money to invest in well-being and invest in productive capacity. And the fiscal structure or the fiscal federalism has not helped to optimize the impact of both subsidy removal and devaluation. It has also enhanced the negative outcome of these two policies. So my sense is that you need to be more structural in analyzing the failure, but ultimately, I think the article's point is that, look, if this policy is your major economic policy, the impact is failure. What's the answer? Is it to reform that policy, or is it to end that policy and bring back and also corrupt, inefficient policy, which is subsidy as it is to be? So I think the debate should be, what will you do differently? One, what is the macroeconomic environment that sustains what will be new? Three, can we trust your personality to drive this reform? And four, what's the evidence that the outcome will be different? It's not enough to say subsidy should go or subsidy should come. That's not, for me, a winning argument. It should be stronger than that. What will you do differently? How will you run the new subsidy regime? What will you do different to make the impact different? And how can we trust that if you keep the same corrupt system, how can the outcome be different? So we can have two problems. One, no subsidy, or subsidy with corruption, no subsidy without impact on the people. Okay. Both of them are not acceptable.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amadi, for that clarification.